Being a first-generation American, what was your childhood like in the United States?
My mom was a hotel maid. She would actually rent a room for us to stay in while she did her job. Build your business around your life rather than build your life around your business. You can work with people who are coming from the border who have nothing but the clothes on their back, literally. Or you can work with Amazon. You can move their executives from country to country. You know what I mean? You can work with $1 million investors. You can essentially buy a green card for $1.2 million in the United States. A lot of lawyers are really stuck on kind of old methods of communication. It's a necessary sacrifice that I have to make in order to build the foundation that's going to get me there. Sue, you should definitely file the lawsuit. Take control of your case.
So Waleed, last month, Bloomberg Law posted an article that reads, overall, the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, the agency that oversees legal immigration, had a record backlog of almost 9 million pending applications. Aside from the fact that there's a lot of immigrants coming into the country, what do you think is happening?
First of all, I don't think that's surprising at all. You said it was 9 million immigration cases. I would imagine it's much more than that. All immigration cases pending with USCIS, I think it's being caused, number one, primarily because of an overwhelming amount of applications that are filed, which are due to people coming into the United States through various means, whether it's through a visa or whether it's through the border or things like that. But I also think that COVID really impacted application processing overall, and they really haven't fully recovered from that.
Let's say someone's immigration case has been pending for a long time. What should they do?
So first thing, you need to determine whether your case is ready to be approved. So there are certain visa backlogs that are kind of built by the U.S. government. For example, siblings of U.S. citizens have a very long time to wait before they're eligible to come to the United States with a green card. It's built in that way, right? We don't think, at least the U.S. government doesn't necessarily think that siblings of U.S. citizens are a very important family category, so they make them wait a really long time. There are other categories that are more important, like spouse of U.S. citizen, child of U.S. citizen, certain employment-based categories, and those don't really have a wait. So if one of those applications has been pending for a long time, there are a number of things that you can do. First, you can reach out to USCIS or the agency that's handling your case and just do an inquiry and see what's taking so long. You can also do an expedite request if you think that there's a good reason, like financial loss or the threat of harm to a family member. You can ask USCIS to expedite your case. And then if that doesn't work, you can always sue them in federal court and have a judge order them to make a decision on your case.
And you don't think suing USCIS would be negative for a person's case?
Suing USCIS, no, I don't think it's negative for a person's case. The ultimate goal of this kind of lawsuit, which is called a Mandamus Lawsuit, which comes from the Latin word that means mandatory, mandamus, mandatory. Basically, you're asking the agency, USCIS, to do their job, right? So they have a job to do that's prescribed to them by law. They must make an adjudication, a decision on this application. And there are other federal laws that say that they have to do that within a reasonable period of time. So the lawsuit does not really have anything to do with the underlying case. The underlying case is completely separate from the lawsuit. So a successful lawsuit could mean a not successful result in the case. And that kind of goes back to a case-by-case specific determination of, is the underlying case a good one, a solid one? Does it need additional evidence, things like that? But ultimately, USCIS and the government is sued all the time for delayed applications. I don't think they take it personally. And I also think that the person who's actually making the decision on your application, who's holding the application in your hands, doesn't know that you sued them.
So let's say someone has been waiting 3 years for a decision and they want to sue the government. Can you walk me through that process?
Yeah, so first of all, I would need to know what kind of application it is. So asylum applications, for instance, take much longer to get approved. They are, typically like 5, 6 years before you even get an interview, and then after the interview, it could take many months or years. So if someone came to me and told me that, their asylum had been pending for 3 years, I would initially think that that's not a good one to file a lawsuit for, because we know that asylums take about 5 years on average, so that delay might not be unreasonable under the law.
So it has to be unreasonable.
Yeah, so you at least have to, you have to make the argument that it's unreasonable, or you have to feel confident as a lawyer that that the delay is unreasonable. And there's different, cases that say what reasonable and not reasonable is. But I would then ask that person, if it was an asylum application, for example, I would ask them, are there any things that you think, would necessitate an expedite request on your case? If they are, for example, very, very ill and they need their asylum case to be approved so they can get a green card, so they can get insurance, then I would say, okay, we have a really good, we have an argument that, that your case should be expedited. So I might recommend an expedite request or something like that. But if you come to me and let's say your, marriage-based green card application has been pending for 3 years, I would think that's definitely an unreasonable delay, because they're taking about 8 months to a year to make those decisions now. So if it's 3 years, I would think it's an unreasonable delay. And I would want to ask the client about, what, if anything, in their past may be causing this delay. So sometimes there are security issues, background check issues. Sometimes your case just kind of gets lost at USCIS, believe it or not. So I would try to figure out if there's anything that's causing the delay, and then kind of go from there.
And is your client having to go to court to file a lawsuit? How does that work?
No, so you don't have to go to court. I guess theoretically you could go to court. Each judge kind of has his or her own specific rules. So if an immigrant is filing a lawsuit, 99% of the time they don't have to go to court. 5% of the time I have to go to court, and the client doesn't need to be there. Unless they want to be there, that's their right. They're more than welcome to be there.
Is it confrontational at all, or is it like a simple process?
So in the type of case that we're doing, in the type of immigration litigation case that we're doing, it's a little bit more streamlined. So it's not kind of like the jury trial that you might see on TV, right, where you select the jury and the jury makes a decision. It's pretty much all on papers. So we write back and forth. They write something, the government will write something talking about what their position is. We'll respond to that. They'll respond to us. We'll go up into in front of the judge and we'll argue our point. And it's mostly just legal arguments, nothing facts, nothing really factual too much. Legal arguments, and we make our case about why the delay is unreasonable.
Being a first-generation American, what was your childhood like in the United States?
So my childhood, I would describe it as a little bit difficult, honestly. My dad, he struggled his entire life with substance abuse issues. He's old right now and still struggles with some substance abuse issues. So, and I felt like it was at its height when we were younger. Like the very developmental years, maybe 5 through 15, 20. And so he wasn't around too much. He was a good father figure, but it was always controversial. And growing up in an immigrant community, my mom was a hotel maid. She worked at a hotel. She was making like $5, $6 an hour back then. Wow. She would take us with her to the hotel. She would actually rent a room for us to stay in while she did her job. And I remember we would help her out sometimes, folding the towels and everything. And with what was going on with my dad, there was some stigma. There's stigma around that in our community. Arabs, Muslims, we have our problems, but drug abuse is not really one of the ones that kind of comes up a lot. There was a little bit of stigma, but overall, I think that I'm really glad of the upbringing that I got. It was rough, tough. It was pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and ultimately that's kind of gotten me to where I am today. The attitude that was instilled in me, and the motivation and the drive, I think is invaluable.
That must have been very difficult.
Yeah, it was.
A lot of attorneys are first-generation Americans. However, they don't go the immigration route, the immigration law. Why did you choose immigration law?
So I feel like I didn't want to go to immigration law at first. I went to law school wanting to do criminal defense. And ultimately, I worked my first internship at the public defender's office in Nashville, Tennessee. And I didn't really like the work I was doing. I was doing appeals. And it was just, a lot of, in the criminal defense, the Constitution protects defendants big time, right? So they get a lot of rights and appeals and all of this stuff, and it has to be provided to them for free. So obviously, if someone is convicted and they get all of these appeals, and someone has to do them. And for the most part, like the ones that I worked on were non-meritorious, or they weren't going anywhere, you know what I mean? So I felt like I was kind of wasting my time in criminal defense, even though I realized that I didn't do the boots on the ground type of work. Like I wasn't in the courtroom fighting for people's rights or, arguing cases and stuff like that. But one day one of the lawyers came down to the basement where we were all staying. All the interns were in this basement. And he was like, hey, does anyone speak Somalian? I was like, no. And everyone looked at him like he was crazy. And I was like, no, I speak Arabic though. And like a lot of Somalians, like they understand some Arabic. And he was like, all right, come with me. So we go across the street to the jail. And there's a criminal defendant there who's incarcerated. And he spoke Somalian guy. Turns out he didn't speak a lick of Arabic. I went there essentially I just got to watch. And basically, they were talking about the immigration consequences of his guilty plea that he was about to take. So this guilty plea that he was going to take was going to result probably in deportation proceedings. And then that, for me, opened my mind to immigration. Like, I was like, wow, okay. So then I saw the the immigration implications of a criminal case, right? And that opened the door to me to a field which we call Crimmigration, which is like criminal immigration. And yeah, that was kind of my first exposure to immigration law, and it just really drew my interest like really, really quickly. And I started discovering that immigration law is so broad that it's not just criminal. It's international law, it's family law, it's employment law, business, there's investments, there's the opportunity to work with big clients, corporations, multi-million-dollar corporations, and also like refugees who have nothing, everything in between. So I knew that this was where I wanted to go because it was just so broad, and it would allow me to do so much within like the immigrant community.
Do you know what ended up happening with that person that was in jail?
No.
No. Okay, so
I would imagine that he's not in the best situation right now.
So you mentioned that when you went into law school, you saw yourself going another direction. What was your favorite class in law school, and do you think that class helped you become the attorney you are today?
For sure, yeah. I feel like my favorite class in law school actually turned out to be administrative law, which is it's kind of complicated. It's definitely a really complicated body of law, but basically it has to do with the agencies that are created in the United States, like the IRS, USCIS, Department of Homeland Security. My professor would call these the headless fourth branch of government. And they kind of are. Like they don't really fit squarely within any branch of government, but they kind of do the role of all three branches of government. So the body of law around their creation and how to hold them accountable was really, really interesting to me. And it's something that sounds really, really boring. I know, it's like, oh, you're talking about, administrative law, like that sounds really boring. But like constitutionally speaking, it's a very interesting concept. And we live in an administrative state. I feel like we do. I mean, everywhere you go, you're subject to this regulation and, red tape and all this stuff. So the idea of holding the government agencies accountable was really intriguing to me. Other than that, con law, I really like constitutional law. I also really like moot court, which is like arguing cases in a pretend court environment. That was fun.
In law school, they don't really teach you how to run your business though. Mm-hmm. And now owning your immigration law firm, what have you what have you seen yourself looking at, or what books have you been reading? Who have you been learning from to really run your business in the most effective manner?
That's a good question. I feel like mostly I draw upon my experience at past law firms, and I learn what I do like and what I don't like. Like for example, at one law firm, for example, I really like the type of cases that they did, right? At another law firm, I really did not like, the high volume type of case work that they did. They took on so many cases. Or I didn't like, for example, how this case management software, but I like this case management software. So mostly it kind of stems from my years working in the field and kind of getting an understanding of, what I like and what I don't like. And fortunately, when you're a business owner, especially a small business owner, you really have the opportunity to build your business around your life rather than build your life around your business. So the core principles that are important to me are pretty immovable in my business. I like geographic flexibility. I like to be able to take the cases that I want and deal with the clients, the type of personalities that I want to. So those things are, I think the biggest benefits. But there are a lot of immigration law groups out there, like small business immigration lawyer groups that talk about how they do things. They talk about all different kind of things. They're on YouTube, they're on podcasts, they're everywhere. So.
Can you share some of those, or you don't?
Yeah, for sure. So there's one called Maximum Lawyer that I follow a lot. One of the guys who runs it is actually an immigration lawyer. His name is Jim Hacking. In my opinion, he's running one of the best immigration law firms in the country. Like if you go to his Google profile, it's like 700 5-star reviews or something. Wow. He has locations in DC, San Diego, St. Louis. He has like a remote team in like Argentina. He's got like 50, 60 people working for him. And I learned about him actually in law school and as a young immigration lawyer because I would watch his videos on YouTube all the time about immigration and how he advised clients to do this particular immigration thing. So it was my way of like getting training as a lawyer. And he would do these live events all the time where he would ask immigrants questions and live and answer, or immigrants would ask him questions and he would answer. Those are always really entertaining because it's kind of like Immigration Jeopardy. You never really know what kind of question you're going to get.
Are you doing anything like that where you answer people's questions?
I am trying to.
Okay.
I will be doing that soon. I'll be doing that soon. I'm trying to do a social media overhaul, and it's in the process. I realize social media is something that honestly I can't handle on my own. It's just I feel like you're young, man. You're younger than I. You're from another generation. You guys get it a little bit more than I do. But I'm trying to get it. I'm trying to get the social media right.
You'll get it eventually.
Yeah. But Jim Hacking, he is part of Maximum Lawyer. So I learned about Maximum Lawyer through first learning immigration from him, and now he's kind of also teaching me how to run a business.
So what inspired you to open up your own law firm?
I feel like I'm pretty entrepreneurial, and then my wife got a job here in Chicago that prompted us to move. And I saw it as like a really good opportunity to take this risk.
Have you always been like that?
Yeah, I think so. And I honestly kind of wanted to have my own law firm for a while, but my wife continued to advise me against it because she thought I needed more experience and security, stability, all this stuff. And ultimately I think she was right. And the timing, thankfully, was really, really good. So that's pretty much it. The opportunity, the desire was there, and the opportunity presented itself. So it really created a very good environment to to test this out.
So what have you done to really stand out as a lawyer, as an immigration lawyer?
Honestly, not much right now. I don't think, Giovanni, and that's something that I have to reckon with a little bit because as a business owner and a practicing lawyer, it's very hard to do things like other than those two, at least at the beginning. Like this first year for me has been really challenging, right? Where I haven't, had the opportunity to like put myself out there a little bit more. And it's hard because that's a very important aspect of being a lawyer, right? Your legal career and making a name for yourself and all of this stuff. And I felt like before I started my business, I was really a rising star. Like, in the firm that I was at before, the type of work that I was doing, a lot of it was getting nationally recognized. But then when I started my own firm, I went to like a very different level, you know what I mean, where no one really knew about me and no one, and I
How does that feel?
It's hard, but I know that I have to stay here where I am right now in order to first build my business and then start putting myself out there, getting a little bit more name recognition, doing pro bono work, doing speaking events, being like a recognized person on social media. So I feel like it's necessary. So that's how I view it right now. It's a necessary sacrifice that I have to make in order to build the foundation that's going to get me there, right?
So what made you realize that you have to kind of take a step back for a second to really go forward, and maybe it's not going to be in 1 year or 2 years, but maybe in 10 years, I think you're for sure going to be in a way better position than working at just some law firm in a building nearby.
Yeah, I think so too, and that's the goal. And I always, there's this, I think it's a verse from the Bible. I'm not sure. I read it in a book, but I realized that I've always kind of lived my life in accordance with the principle of as you sow, so shall you reap. If you're familiar with that, basically it means, the more seeds you plant, the more you're going to get to harvest one day, right? If you don't plant seeds now, you're not going to eat in the future. So there's a time for planting, and then there's a time for harvesting, right? So right now, I just have to plant. I'm planting. The harvest will come, right? I know that the harvest will come, but there's times to plant, and that's now, so.
I feel like a lot of people nowadays, they have a really short-term mentality that they want to plant and then get the harvest next week.
Yeah.
How do you feel about having long-term goals and really having a long-term vision for your firm and for your career?
I think it's essential. You have to have that short-term and long-term mentality. And it can develop over time. Like your vision of what your firm's going to look like in 20 years doesn't necessarily have to be rock solid right now. But I think it's very important. I think it's very important in our field as well as lawyers because what you do now, the decisions you make now are definitely going to affect the type of practice you have in the future. So you have to have the discipline enough to say, I'm not going to do this, or I'm going to say no to this client who's going to ultimately pay me, right? Because this case is going to take too long, or this client is not the type of client that I want to deal with, or it will take me so much time to gain the knowledge to do this kind of case. So you have to have the discipline to say no right now because I know something else is going to come, right? So, and a lot of young lawyers, especially in their own business, they have a sensation that they have to take everything that walks in the door. And I've been there before. You feel like you have to take every client that comes through. And I really think that that's a recipe for disaster. Take every case and every client that comes through. So you have to have that discipline in order to just like push things off a little bit, and then have the faith that, something better is going to come like down the line.
So let's say I'm going through an immigration process right now. What's the best way to avoid any roadblocks?
People are going to think I'm biased, but I think hire a lawyer. I really do think hire a lawyer or be ready to put in a lot of hours of research, okay? Because the best defense is a good offense, right? Or is that what the saying is? Anyway, what I mean. Basically, if you do it right the first time, then that's going to take away 75%. That's going to make your application probably 75% more likely to be normal.
Okay.
Right? If you hire a lawyer, you do it right the first time, the chances of it going through the regular process without issues are a lot higher. Right? So I think that's the best step that people can take. Also, like, for example, I mean, as a specific example, I think citizenship applications in particular move a lot faster during election years because, the president wants more citizens, so more citizens can vote for him. So if you're thinking about filing citizenship during an election year, I think that it's a lot easier and faster to get your citizenship.
That's interesting, very interesting. Can you share a challenging case that turned out to be a success story?
There's this woman from my hometown in Tennessee. She was going through a really, really rough time getting her green card that was based on marriage. Her and her husband had separated. They lived in different states. Her green card was pending forever. And ultimately, I had to do a lot of research on her case, and there was a very, very narrow path to victory in that case, especially because she had a marriage-based green card application. Her and her husband were separated. They were living in other states. So I had to first get her entire immigration file from USCIS. I had to do a Freedom of Information Act request. It was like 1,000 pages long. I had to pick through it and pick through it and pick through it. I did a lot of legal research, and I finally found that if we could get her husband to agree to just say that the marriage was entered into for love and not for immigration benefits, then we would win the case, right? That there's a chance that we would win the case if we were able to convince the immigration officer that the marriage was really entered into for love and not an immigration benefit. So even though under the law, I learned this from that case, under the law is you can be separated, that's fine, and you can not even really be married anymore as long as that marriage was entered into not solely for immigration reasons, okay? So ultimately, we had to talk to the husband. We had to, make a lot of arrangements, and we filed a lawsuit because a green card was forever. We knew that an interview was coming from the lawsuit, so we filed the lawsuit. We got the interview. We got her and her husband back in the same room for the same time and forever, and we were able to argue in front of the USCIS officer, and he ultimately believed us that that they had entered into the marriage for love, but then things happened and the marriage kind of broke apart.
So how long did it take from the time that you filed the lawsuit to actually getting the interview?
From the time I filed the lawsuit to the interview was like weeks.
Wow.
So the case was pending for like 3 years and just not going anywhere. So we filed the lawsuit. Maybe 2 weeks later, 2 or 3 weeks later, we got a notice for the interview, that the interview was like in 2 or 3 weeks. So about a month after we filed the lawsuit, we were in the interview room.
Wow. Mm-hmm. So going back for a second to when you first started your firm, mm-hmm. How did you feel like going from guaranteed paycheck to pretty much making money based on your skills? It really wasn't as hard as you might think, thank God. I mean, my wife works, so she was able to keep a steady income. And at least my experience in practicing immigration law is, there's really no shortage of clients, so there's really no shortage of potential money that you can make, right? It's just the type of client that you want, the type of case that you want. Knock on wood, I'm really grateful that I was able to kind of just hit the ground running and, be able to make income kind of quick. My wife and I had saved, we had a little bit of savings and, we had her job. So we were in a good financial position in order for me to take that risk. And how are clients finding you right now?
Right now, it's mostly word of mouth and referrals. And that's fine. I do definitely want to grow to do some social media marketing, but we're a very small operation right now. It's just me and one paralegal. We're growing. We're going to be adding like 3 additional people in a couple of weeks.
Wow.
So once we get those people, then we'll be able to do a little bit more marketing and people will be able to hear about us through that way.
So as law firms grow, it's a little bit harder to be more effective in their communication with their clients. How can lawyers keep that effective communication with clients as they grow?
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. But I think that a lot of lawyers are really stuck on kind of old methods of communication, just email or schedule a call, right? That's pretty much how you're going to get a hold of your lawyer. And I think that, like in my firm, we use WhatsApp, we use iMessage, we use email, we use Calendly. You know, our clients get a link to my Calendly, so they can put time on my calendar. Like if for some reason I don't answer the phone, or they're not getting a hold of me, or they just want to have a 20, 30-minute conversation. If you're my client, that's what you paid for, right? So you have that calendar link, and you can just go ahead and put time on my calendar.
So it's to speak with you and not with the paralegal.
Correct, yeah. And the way that we also operate is, you know, we give our client the choice over what forum they want to communicate with. So whether they want to communicate with us over WhatsApp or email, and then if it's WhatsApp, for example, we'll create a group with me and the paralegal and the client. If it's email, everyone stays on the email. Me, the paralegal, and the client. So, you know, in my opinion, people are paying for a lawyer's expertise. The lawyer needs to be completely involved. Paralegals are a very important part of the legal process, you know, but you're not paying a paralegal you're not paying for a paralegal, you're paying for the attorney. So I am involved in every case that comes to my law firm. You know, my paralegal right now does a fantastic job, but I am constantly aware of everything that's going on.
So what do you think are the most important skills an immigration attorney must have to be a successful attorney?
Number one, you need to have patience, okay? So, you know, a lot of the times we're dealing with, although we're dealing with very highly educated people, and, you know, on occasion we're dealing with very professional people, a lot of the times we're dealing with, you know, in the law, we use a term called unsophisticated party. It's not as bad as it probably sounds in, you know, regular English, but it's actually kind of a legal term, which means, you know, a party that might not have the intelligence and the competence to understand these very complicated legal issues. So you need to have patience, number one. I think number two, having another language skill is huge in the immigration law field. Obviously, most of your clients are going to speak another language, so if you can connect to them on that level, that's huge. And you also need to have like a sense of, you know, I don't really know how to say it like in English, but in Arabic we call it rahma, which is like, you know, kind of, it translates to mercy, you know. I feel like that's a very important trait to have as well, maybe compassion. So, for example, understanding that your clients might not make their payments on time, being flexible with that, being affordable, you know, understanding their struggle, I think, is another huge skill that you can have.
Okay, so aside from your clients, let's say an example, not paying on time, what are some other challenges you faced as a business owner?
Probably having, you know, the vast majority of the firm be on your shoulders, or the responsibilities of running the firm day in and day out are on my shoulders. So it's not just casework, it's also, you know, finances and billing and HR and everything else. So you have to wear a lot of hats, definitely.
If you could go back to when you started your immigration law firm just about a year ago, what are some tips you would give to yourself?
I think I would have called it something different, honestly. I think I would have not named it what I named it. I think I went very safe with the name, traditional last name, insert legal practice area, law, you know, LLC. Was it kind of just a, you know, a tried and true type of naming paradigm. But I think I would have named it different, and I would have done like a trade name, you know, like a different name, for example. Like they have some law firms that are called like Boundless, right? There's one called Boundless Immigration, which is like an online kind of immigration service provider. I feel like separating your name from the law firm is a good thing and a bad thing, but I think in the future it makes your law firm a little bit more marketable for like a sale perspective. Like if you did want to sell your business, you know, your business is not so intricately linked with your name.
Yeah.
You do sacrifice a little bit of name recognition if you do things that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I think probably I would have also, I think maybe I would have had a person help me out from the start, like an employee or something, help me out from the start, instead of going at it 100% by myself for like the first 6 months. You know, I would have had someone from the start.
What are your short and long-term goals with your law firm?
My short-term goals right now, you know, I'm living in Chicago. I don't really know where I'm going to like settle down. I've hopped around from like city to city during like the past like really 6 years. I'm not sure where I'm going to settle down. So my short-term goal for my law firm is to remain geographically flexible. Basically, right now I can literally take my laptop and go anywhere in the world and work. You know, that's kind of how I want to keep it right now. I'm not very you know, kind of ingrained or attached to a city.
Does that feel good?
It does. It really does. And I can move my business. Like I can move my business very easily. You know, the way that I have things set up right now is, you know, it's mostly like a virtual law firm, and I want to keep it that way until I kind of decide where I want to go. Long-term goals, you know, obviously, I want my firm to make me financially comfortable. But I do want to grow. I do want to grow to a point that's not like a huge immigration conglomerate. I want to have an office, and you know, I've always imagined like having an office where there's like immigrant shops and like restaurants like downstairs or something, you know, and like a playground or a soccer field like in the back for like kids to come play in, and have like English classes and, you know, free like community services. And
wow.
That's kind of what I really kind of imagine one day. Just like your really friendly neighborhood, like immigration lawyer that like kind of is very ingrained into a community.
That says a lot about you.
Yeah, so that's kind of the long-term goal. Who knows where that's going to be, but we'll see. So right now I'm kind of just hoping to stay flexible, but in the future I definitely want to, you know, attach myself and ingrain myself into a city and community.
Okay, if you had the chance to speak with a young lawyer who's maybe looking to enter the immigration law sector, what would you tell that lawyer?
Probably diversify your experiences. Like we've talked about before, immigration is very broad. So, you know, you can work with people who are coming from the border who have nothing but the clothes on their back, literally, right? Or you can work with, you know, you can work with Amazon. You know, you can move their executives from country to country. You know what I mean? You can work with $1 million investors. You can essentially buy a green card for $1.2 million in the United States. And the lawyers who do that are very busy. You know, they stay very busy.
Wow.
And there's everything in between. So I would say diversify your experiences and understand which one you like most, right? So there's the business, there's litigation, there's family, there's investment, corporate. I would say taste all of those, you know, taste all of those. Or go to a place that, you know, will give you the opportunity to try all of those, to figure out which one you really like.
So just to be clear for a second, let's say someone has a case and it's unreasonably delayed. What should they do?
Talk to a lawyer. Talk to a lawyer, number one. Depending on the case, you know, some cases they post the processing times. Okay. So sometimes they post the processing time as a year or 2 years. You can always check the processing times, see if it's really outside of processing times or not.
And what if they've done everything possible, USCIS ignores them, no response, they were supposed to get the decision in 2 years, it's been 5 years, what should they do?
Sue. You should definitely file the lawsuit. Take control of your case. That's the way I see it. That's the way I see the biggest benefit of filing a lawsuit on a delayed immigration case is you take control, right? You can take control. We know that when we file the lawsuit, we know when the interview is going to be, right? We know we're taking the first step, not USCIS. It's not like they send us an interview notice and then we scramble, right? It's like we're methodical. We know that if we file the lawsuit, there's going to be an interview, and after X amount of time, there's going to be a decision. And if you lose, there's possibly an appeals process. So, you know, it's that level of control over your case. It's always better, in my opinion, than to just have USCIS just, you know, willy-nilly do whatever they want, take how long they want. So, yeah, if you're fed up, you just got to take control. That's what it is. You got to take the gloves off. You know?
That sounds powerful.
Yeah.
How do you define success in your world?
That's a really good question. I guess it's like your level of personal satisfaction. You know what I mean? Obviously, there is like outward manifestations of success that like people can see, right? You know, people can see, you know, your car, or they can see your clothes, and they can see your office. You know, they can see your apartment and all this stuff. Those are nice to have, those outward, you know, metrics of success. But I think just your own personal satisfaction with what you do, and if you are really satisfied with what you're doing and what you're building, then I think you're a successful person. So, you know, my job, fortunately, keeps me busy. It gives me gratitude. It challenges me in ways that I like to be challenged. And, you know, we have a pretty good win rate with our clients. So overall, I think by every metric, you know, I am successful. But that doesn't mean that it stops, right? You can't be content. You got to keep, as you continue to grow, you know, like right now, I'm a successful law firm owner that has 1 employee. Will I be a successful law firm owner that has 3 employees and maybe twice as many clients? That's the next challenge, right? Am I going to continue to gain that level of gratitude from the work that I do and the relationship that I have with my employees and my clients? That's going to be another challenge. So you're always leveling up.
So in other words, you have to be grateful, but never satisfied.
I think that's a good way to put it. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Never satisfied, man. You can't stop growing. You can't stop growing.
Okay. Waleed, thank you very much for your time. This has been a great conversation. I know a lot of people are going to find value from this video, from this podcast, wherever they're listening to. I appreciate you for your time. I appreciate you for your friendship. Thank you, Waleed.
It's my pleasure, man. Really good to see you.
Thank you. Likewise.